Okay. You know that feeling you get when you walk out of a doctor's appointment and you're like, hold on, did they even listen to me? Like you tried to tell them what was up, but it's like they already had their prescription pad out before you even finished, you know? Ugh, I've totally been there, which is why this deep dive is so interesting to me.
What's interesting is we're getting this whole perspective from Coach Dave.
Hmm.
He's someone who actually coaches people on how to handle the healthcare system.
It's like having a personal trainer for doctor's appointments. Sign me up.
Totally.
You sent over some articles about feeling lost in the healthcare system, and this one, Navigating Entitlement and Authority in Healthcare, Insights from Coach Dave, it really struck a chord with me.
Yeah, it's such a different way to look at it, and it gets at why a lot of people just feel powerless when it comes to their own health.
For sure. So we're going to really dig into those power dynamics today. We're going to unpack what this article calls entitlement and authoritative attitudes in healthcare, like what causes them, and most importantly, how we can deal with them. Because, this isn't about bashing doctors. It's about giving you the tools to stand up for yourself and have a better experience.
And I think understanding those dynamics is really the first step to feeling more empowered as a patient.
Totally. So let's start by, defining these terms. Okay, entitlement. Sounds kind of harsh, no?
Yeah, a little bit.
But the article's not trying to make healthcare providers out to be the bad guys.
No, not at all. It's more nuanced than that. It's not so much about a doctor being out to get you. It's more about how certain attitudes can have a negative impact on patients without them even meaning to.
Okay, yeah. Can you give me an example, though? When would you say a healthcare provider is being entitled in the sense of the word?
Let me see. Think of it like this. A doctor dismissing a patient's concerns because they think, well, I'm the expert here, so I must be right. Or maybe they just don't take feedback well, even from other doctors, because they're like, nope, I'm the one in charge here.
Okay, now that you mention it, I can kind of see that, like that whole doctor knows best kind of thing.
Exactly. And while that might come from a place of being confident in what they know, it can make patients feel like they're not being taken seriously.
Which just plays right into that feeling of being dismissed. No wonder we leave feeling like we weren't really heard.
Right. And it can spiral from there, making people less likely to be involved in their own healthcare or speak up when they need to.
Which, impacts their health in the end. Talk about a vicious cycle.
And then we have authoritative attitudes, which can sometimes be connected to entitlement.
Okay, authoritative attitudes, is that just a fancy way of saying some doctors can be kind of bossy?
It's not really about being bossy. It's more like they have a very, how do I put this, a paternalistic approach, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it honestly comes from wanting to help. Doctors spend years and years learning how to treat people, so it's easy for them to slip into making decisions for patients instead of with them.
I see. They have all this knowledge and they just want to jump in and fix everything.
Yeah, exactly. And it can look like, I don't know, maybe they hold back information because it seems too technical for a patient to get. Or sometimes they overrule what a patient wants because they really believe they know what's best, even if the patient sees things differently.
Which, again, I get it. It's coming from a good place. But it can still make patients feel like their opinions don't matter.
For sure. And that can be really damaging to the whole patient-doctor relationship, which really needs to be built on trust and respect both ways.
Right, of course. Okay, so we've talked about these dynamics, but what makes some healthcare providers act this way? Is it just a personality thing?
It's way more complicated than that. A lot of systemic and societal stuff comes into play. Let's just start with their training. Medical school is super intense, a ton of pressure, and there's this culture of you have to be perfect.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. You're expected to know everything and never mess up, right?
And that kind of environment can make people resistant to admitting they don't know something or being open to other ideas. It just reinforces that whole the doctor's word is law thing, which in medicine, while it's not always the case, it's always changing and stuff.
And then on top of that, you've got that power imbalance in those medical hierarchies.
Oh, absolutely. From day one of med school, there's this power structure where doctors are at the top. And while they should be respected for what they know, that shouldn't shut down open communication.
That makes sense. But, the article also says that we, society as a whole, are part of this problem.
We really are. Think about it. We put doctors on a pedestal, they're never wrong.
It's true. We're practically trained not to question anything they say, even if something feels off.
Exactly. And while it's important to respect their knowledge, that whole can't touch this image feeds into entitlement, doesn't it? It's almost like we're giving them permission to be the only ones making decisions.
And, let's be real. I'm just as guilty of that as anyone. But thing is, doctors are human too, right?
It's so important to remember that. And the article talks about how much pressure they're under every single day.
Hmm.
The long hours, all the decisions they have to make, the emotional weight of dealing with sickness all the time.
You mentioned compassion fatigue before. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. It's like this emotional burnout that can happen when you're around trauma all the time. And it's really common with healthcare professionals, unfortunately.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. Makes a lot of sense, though.
Right. It's not an excuse for bad behavior or anything, but understanding the human side of things adds another layer to all this. It's a good reminder that good healthcare has to go both ways. It's a team effort.
100%. So how do we actually make that happen then? Because I'm sure people listening are like, okay, this is all interesting, but what can I actually do about it?
That's where Coach Dave comes in with the goods.
Yeah.
His whole thing is giving patients the tools to take charge of their own healthcare. And he's got some really practical tips.
Okay, lay it on me. What's Coach Dave's secret sauce?
He breaks it down into 3 parts: before your appointment, during, and after. And it all starts with being prepared.
Love a good plan. So before we even step foot in the doctor's office.
Coach Dave says write down your questions and concerns beforehand.
Oh my gosh, that is such good advice. I can't even tell you how many times I've totally blanked when the doctor's like, so, what brings you in today?
Oh, happens to everyone.
Yeah.
But having that list right there in front of you, it not only refreshes your memory, but it also makes sure you hit all your important points, even if you get flustered or they interrupt you.
Yeah, for sure. Like having a roadmap for the whole conversation.
Exactly. And here's another one I thought was smart. Think about bringing someone with you to the appointment.
Ooh, like a healthcare wingman. I like it.
Exactly. It could be a friend, someone from your family, whoever you trust. They can back you up, take notes if you need it, or even just offer a different perspective while you're talking to the doctor.
Sometimes you just need someone there to be like, hey, don't forget to ask about that side effect you were worried about.
Exactly. An extra set of eyes and ears never hurts, especially if you're feeling overwhelmed.
Okay, so we're prepped. We got our wingman ready to go. What about during the appointment itself? Any tips for, like, dealing with those power dynamics when you're actually face-to-face?
This is where being clear and assertive is key. Coach Dave really pushes for being totally honest with your doctor, even if it feels a little weird.
I know, right? Sometimes it's easier to just be the good patient and not make waves.
Oh, tell me about it. But here's the thing. Your doctor's there to help you, and they can only do that if they know what's really going on.
That's a really good point. And while we're at it, don't be shy about saying what you want.
Yes. Coach Dave talks about how important it is to be upfront about your values, what you're hoping to get out of treatment, and anything you're unsure about, like certain procedures, medications, that sort of thing.
So it's not just about answering their questions, it's about making sure they hear you.
Exactly. You have every right to ask if you don't understand something, and you absolutely have the right to get a second opinion if you're not comfortable with the plan they're suggesting.
Getting a second opinion shouldn't be a bad thing.
It shouldn't. It's about getting all the info you need to make the best choice for your health. And remember, a second opinion isn't about saying your doctor's wrong. It's about being involved in your own care.
Okay, yeah, I like how you put that. It's about taking control.
Exactly. And that whole taking control thing, it goes beyond your doctor's appointments too. Coach Dave is all about patients being empowered, like all the time.
Interesting. How do you do that, though?
It's about becoming your own health advocate. Learn about your condition, do some research on treatment options, but stick to the good sources, okay? Like medical journals, government websites, those kinds of places.
Right, because let's be honest, there is so much information online these days, and not all of it's good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get sucked into bad info.
Yeah?
So, yeah, credible sources only. And look, you don't have to become a doctor yourself overnight or anything. It's about knowing enough to have a good conversation with your doctor.
So, like, do your research, but then bring it to the table to talk about.
Exactly. And Coach Dave's a big believer in knowing your rights as a patient.
Give me a refresher on what that means, exactly.
Stuff like, being able to see your own medical records, understanding what your insurance covers, because that whole billing thing, oh boy.
Ugh, don't even get me started.
Right. It's about being in the know and feeling confident enough to deal with all that stuff. But at the end of the day, the big thing is knowing that you deserve to be treated with respect throughout this whole process.
Absolutely. What you think and feel matters, and you have every right to stand up for yourself.
You said it.
It's true, right? Knowledge is power. I'm already feeling more empowered, and we're just talking about it.
Me too, for sure. And the best part is, we've been focusing on what you can do. But Coach Dave doesn't just leave it all up to the patient. He talks about needing system-wide change, too.
Good. Because it can't all be on us to fix this whole thing, right?
Exactly. We need a system that actually encourages this kind of teamwork from the very beginning. Like the article talks about, including, more training on communication and ethics right in medical school.
Yeah, I love that. Start them young, right?
Hmm.
So future doctors aren't just learning medical stuff, they're learning how to have these open, honest conversations with their patients.
Exactly. It's about changing the whole culture of medicine to be more collaborative. And that also means, dealing with those power imbalances we were talking about, making sure that nurses, physician assistants, everyone on the care team feels comfortable speaking their mind.
Right, because they all have something important to bring to the table. And I bet you it's not just the patients who benefit from having things be more balanced.
Exactly. It's not about taking anything away from doctors.
Yeah.
It's just acknowledging that everyone's perspective matters. And when that happens, everyone gets better care.
Okay, so system-wide change is super important, but that takes time. What about right now? Any thoughts on how we can encourage our own doctors to be more collaborative?
Ooh, good question. It might seem kind of intimidating, but sometimes, honestly, just talking about it helps. You can say, hey, I've been learning about this whole patient empowerment thing. Let them know that you respect their expertise, but that you want to be a part of the decision-making process too.
Yeah, meet them halfway. Show them you're not trying to tell them they're wrong or anything. Just work together.
Right. You never know. You might just get them thinking about it in a new way.
I love it. Okay, so we've covered a ton today. We talked about those tricky power dynamics in healthcare, what causes them, and most importantly, how to handle them. But before we wrap up, the article ends on this thought-provoking question, and I'm curious to hear your take.
Hit me.
So a lot of what we talked about is all about patient empowerment, right? Which is amazing. But how do we get more healthcare providers on board with this too? How do we inspire that shift from their side?
Man, that is the question, isn't it? It's a big one. It takes change across the board, but also individual doctors being willing to look at their own, biases or habits. But it all boils down to communication, being open to listening and learning from each other and wanting to give the best care possible.
Yes, it really is a two-way street.
It really is.
So to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive gave you some helpful advice and maybe some new tools to navigate your own healthcare journey, feeling more confident and speaking your mind. Remember, you are your own best advocate. Until next time.